Thank you so much for coming along to the screening of Wilmington on Fire. My name is Jenny Barrett and I'm the co-director of the International Centre on Racism, which we founded here at Edge Hill 2 years ago. This event has been very generously funded by the ISR, that's the Institute for Social Responsibility. Let me just tell you a little bit about them and about the ICR as well before we kick off. So the ISR, the Institute for Social Responsibility, is Edge Hill's cross-disciplinary research and knowledge exchange initiative. With a remit to critically examine broad conceptualisations of social responsibility across all disciplines, the Institute is committed to exploring the opportunities for cross-sector collaboration and cooperation and to draw on the experience of practitioners. They're committed to sustaining a vibrant research culture at Edge Hill and thus provide research support in the form of training, research and knowledge exchange funding and annual research fellowships, and they've very generously supported this event. The ICR, the International Centre on Racism, we work on delivering research projects and fora that provide new insights on racisms for academic, civil society and policy communities. Activities include the PKC Millins Lecture, the ICR Annual Conference, student-led conferences, seminar series and ongoing research projects, including a partnership with the European University Institute in Florence on the multimedia magazine Monitor, Global Intelligence on Racism. Okay, so let us just start then, before we begin the screening, on the things that we know. We know that from the 16th century until the 19th century, around 12 million Africans were kidnapped from their homes, taken to a foreign country, and in many cases worked to death. We know too that enslavement as a business and a practice was abolished in Britain in 1807, extending to the whole of the British Empire in 1833. Many of us will know that enslavement was ended as a business in the US in the midst of the American Civil War in the 1860s. We may be very familiar with the rise of the civil rights movement in the US in the 1950s. Names like Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks and their deeds may be known well to us. No doubt we also know about the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and in the UK, the uprisings in Brixton after a London fire led to the death of 13 black people. Names such as Stephen Lawrence, Mark Duggan, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Sarah Reed, and George Floyd are known to most of us, if not all of us. Colonialism, enslavement, Jim Crow laws, the Windrush scandal, and the disproportionate negative experience of black peoples during the COVID pandemic all point to a world that saw, sees, and still needs to challenge racial inequality. What we may not have known until very recently, or indeed until tonight, is the story that we'll be seeing in tonight's documentary screening for Black History Month, and that's Wilmington on Fire. It's a documentary from the African-American filmmaker Chris Everett, and tonight's screening marks the first time that it's been seen in the UK by a British audience. The film lasts an hour and a half, and at its end we'll be joined by Chris from his home in North Carolina. He will be happy to answer questions about the film, about Wilmington and the experience of filming there, and about his career as a documentarist, because what he's actually working on right now is the post-production of Wilmington on Fire Part 2. So we'll start the film now. The lights will be going down, so about an hour and a half after that we'll be able to have our Q&A with Chris. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, how are you doing? Good to see you.
Doing well. Same here.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're just going to say thank you to you. We're going to give you a round of applause to say thank you for the film that we've just watched. So we've literally just finished watching your film, Sobering. There's a lot for us to really process, to come to terms with what we've just seen there. A lot to do with loss of life, loss of people's livelihoods, their fortunes, and terrible trauma as a part of American history that we were not familiar with before. So there is a lot for us to process there, but we've got some people here from Edge Hill, we've got staff and we've got some students, and they've got some questions. If they're shy, I do have some questions of my own as well, but we're going to see if there's anything that they want to say. So if you're all right to just wait for a moment, and we'll see if anybody raises a hand and we'll get some questions going.
Sounds good.
Hello, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, yeah, it's going well, thank you. I just got a question in relation to present-day Wilmington and what is the current racial relations there? Has it eased, or is it still present? There's certain ideologies. Has it passed through generations? Is there still groups of people that believe that? And then I have a follow-up question in regards to since the initial screening of your film, has there been any additional efforts towards compensation of families who are descendants?
Oh, great question. Great question. Wilmington has been it's become like a second home to me. Just going there in prior years of when I was first putting this project together, ended up meeting my wife, who's my wife now, meeting her there. And so I built a lot of great relationships in Wilmington. And the thing is that Wilmington is still dealing with a lot of this legacy of 1898 still. It's still very much segregated, but I think the bright side of it, and Jenny will probably have told you this before doing the screening or after it, is that we actually just wrapped Wilmington on Fire Chapter 2. And that's going to really show what's really going on in Wilmington today and show the individuals who are really trying to move this city past this cloud of 1898 and that legacy of white supremacy in the city. It's going to take a lot of work. It didn't happen overnight, but you have a lot of people on the grassroots level who are doing some amazing things to really move this city forward. And I think the film has done a great job in that as well, to get that ball moving in the right direction. And what was your second question? It totally slipped my mind.
Yeah, sorry. It was just in regards to compensation, since the initial screening of your film, has been any additional efforts?
It's been a few efforts. The Rastafarian guy that you saw in the film, Larry Thomas, who did the poem at the end, he's still leading his efforts. He has an organization that's actually still trying to seek compensation for those descendants. Luckily, a few years ago, when they had a huge forum in Washington, D.C., in Congress, a congressional forum about reparations. And my film was mentioned actually by Dr. Julianne Malveaux to help with that efforts, not only just for the Wilmington Massacre of 1898, but just general reparations in general for African Americans. But nothing has really happened, not even on the national level or locally. Hopefully part 2 can really energize folks to really start trying to push that again. But Larry is pretty much out here on his own, and I try to help when I can help. And just doing things like this and just really continue doing these screenings on a grassroots level is really going to create that change. Hopefully we'll see it, in our lifetime, but we'll see.
Can I ask you, actually, Chris, has it been screened in Wilmington,
yes.
Your film? It has. And how did it go down?
Oh, yeah. We've screened a whole bunch of times in Wilmington. The film, we debuted the film in November 2015 in Wilmington. And I wanted to do that on purpose, and just the stars aligned, I guess, where I wanted to premiere it in Wilmington because it's a Wilmington story. And I wanted to premiere it at one of their biggest film festivals, which is the Cucaloris Film Festival. It's huge in Wilmington. And, Wilmington, Hollywood is there because they have the big Screen Gym Studios in Wilmington. And so a lot of film stuff happens in that town. And so when we actually premiered at Thalian Hall. Thalian Hall is symbolic because that's where people actually met before they actually did the massacre. So I wanted to line all these things up to make a great event and create that dialogue. And it was huge. We actually still hold the festival's record to this day for the most attended screening in its 25-year history. And we've probably screened over 100 times in Wilmington since 2015. So that's really where our home base is for a lot of these type of projects is Wilmington. We have a lot of support there. A lot of the business community has really embraced the project as well. A lot of them have created diversity initiatives within their own companies and do team screenings and events of the film. I'll come and talk and everything. So I never thought that the film would have this type of impact on the city of Wilmington.
That's amazing. Thank you. Let's see if there's another question from the audience. We've got one there and then one over there.
Yeah, thank you. That was a fascinating film, and I actually have about 10 million questions for you, but I'll keep it to just one. For me, the big sort of political twist for me in this film, given the limited knowledge I had of history and politics in the United States, was the history of white supremacy in the Democratic Party. I wasn't aware of that at all.
Right.
And I was wondering if you've had, what kind of response you've had from the Democrats, whether locally, nationally, officially or unofficially.
Well, I've had positive response from the Democratic Party locally. I would say locally, Wilmington, and also throughout North Carolina, because, the party switched, at a certain point in time. And so the Democratic Party, I would say this is even before I even started the film. Back in 2006, they developed a race riot commission, the Wilmington Race Riot Commission. And the lady who you saw in the film, Lorraine Umfleet, she actually wrote the actual official state report for the state of North Carolina. And we also had a few other people that were in the film that actually contributed as well, like Larry, Professor Sandy Darity as well, that contributed to the economic damages during the massacre. But the Democratic Party has always they've been supportive of this. And it's weird because both parties have been supportive. One, the Democratic Party is saying that, hey, we're not like that anymore, and we're promoting social justice and voting rights. But I have people in my own family, like a couple of my uncles, they're diehard conservatives and Republicans, and they love the film also, but they're loving it for a different reason, because it's like they can kind of point the finger at the Democratic Party. So it's like, it's a catch-22 with this. I'm kind of getting support from both sides of the spectrum, on this project.
We've got another question just over from the other side there.
Hi, Chris. I just was wondering, your contributor, Kent, mentioned that he'd found evidence that they'd ratified this law. Did you ever find evidence that they demolished it?
No, I think he's, now I haven't talked to Kent in a while, but I think he's still doing that. I think he's currently writing a book as well about all of that. But that's his lane. He's still on it, he's steady on it. And yeah, we really haven't found any evidence of them actually abolishing. But again, back in 2008, the Democratic Party in the state of North Carolina, they did apologize for their role in this, and wanted to, start the process of moving forward as well. So yeah, I also, with the North Carolina Bar Association, and that's a key thing with this whole history, is that they were able to solidify all these laws and maintain this system of white supremacy in North Carolina for all this time, was with the North Carolina Bar Association. And when you look at the founders of it, George Roundtree and a few others, they were main players in the whole coup of 1898. And I did a screening and Q&A with the actual North Carolina Bar Association last year. And they all, they recognized their contribution. They didn't realize it, that a few of the folks behind the coup actually started the North Carolina Bar Association. So, a lot of these folks were lawyers. They were heavily involved in politics. And so they were able to solidify this whole movement of white supremacy.
It is interesting, isn't it, that so much of the information that we receive in the film comes from Kent Chatfield, who's a local historian, he's an amateur historian, am I right?
Yes, yes.
So it looks as if actually, we had him with his handwritten notes even,
Right.
and photocopies that were sellotaped together. Would you say that it was quite a valuable contribution to have a local historian involved?
Oh yeah, and it was definitely a huge contribution. And I think everyone did. When I put this project together, I really wanted to bring all these minds together. Folks like Larry. I think Larry, the guy who did the poem at the end, he was the first person I reached out to. And he kind of connected me with Kent and others. Like, to me, Larry is really the centerpiece of this, because a lot of people don't notice that he pretty much, about 90% of the people you see on screen, it was because of Larry and his connections. Because he was really one of the only people really in North Carolina and Wilmington that was pushing this issue about 1898, about reparations. And so, I heard about him, saw him online and reached out. I said, man, I want to do a project on the 1898 massacre. And he said, well, whatever you need from me, let's do it. I'm here. And so he connected me with all these folks, because he's known all these people for years. They've done certain things together, events, research sessions, all of that. And so, everyone kind of contributed, in their own way. Professor Darity, he contributed from the economic impact standpoint, because he actually participated in the commission report. As I mentioned earlier, Lorraine Umfleet, she actually wrote the whole commission report as well. And then, we also had a couple of direct descendants, like the descendant of Alex Manley and a descendant of Thomas C. Miller as well. So, Kent contributed greatly, but I think it was really a joint effort of everyone coming together to tell this important story.
Yeah, an ensemble effort, very much so. Let's see if there are any other questions. One over there, yep.
Hello, I just wondered whether global politics played a part in the events that happened in Wilmington. I'm aware that the UK in particular has its own history, certainly around that period of time and certainly before. I just wondered whether there'd been any evidence of the UK in particular contributing or even trying to prevent the events that happened. And I do have a second question that I'll come to as well.
From my knowledge, I don't know if the UK had any. I don't think so. This was all in Wilmington, in North Carolina. It really was a North Carolina move and play. And it was just a thing that they wanted to do to reverse a lot of those gains by African Americans. And also, you saw in the film this whole thing of fusion, this fusion movement of white and Black people working together. It was a North Carolina event, and it was North Carolina, folks that were behind it. But spawned out of that was just this whole thing of white supremacy throughout the United States as well. And so you start seeing other events like this happen. 1906, the Atlanta race riots happened, and they mentioned Wilmington and say they wanted to do the same thing that happened in Wilmington years prior. And so you start to see these things happen throughout the United States to really solidify white supremacy, because they saw that nothing was going to happen. The federal government wasn't going to intervene. And then you see what happened January 6th. The same thing kind of happens when you don't hold people accountable. They're bound to just do something, because I think people just assume people are just going to do the right thing. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. You have to have accountability and things in place for people to not do that.
Sure. And my second question was around women's voice at that particular period in time, and whether there was any evidence to suggest that women were in favour, whether they were completely against, or even if there were attempts. I don't know whether they were powerless, whether there's any evidence to suggest that they were against the action that was taken.
Right. Well, during this time, women didn't have the right to vote. But when you look at Lorraine Umfleet's report, and the report is available online if you haven't checked it out, and I'll probably have Jenny send out an email with that link, because it's available online for free. It's like a 600-page report if you have time to read through all of it. But I know in the report there was mention of African-American women, because at this time, it was very tense. The elections were up. There was a lot of voter intimidation. African-American men were getting their lives threatened if they would vote. A lot of people that were running for office were getting intimidated, threatened. Their lives were threatened as well. But I know African-American women, even though they couldn't vote, you saw the articles of them commenting saying that we still want our men to go out here and vote, because at the end of the day, we're still going to benefit from them voting, even though we can't vote. So women in the African-American community were urging their men to vote. Don't be scared of the intimidation. We have to do this. On the other side, you had women of the Fusionist movement who were married, to those white men that were part of the Fusionist movement. They were pushing, this whole Fusionist movement to move forward as well. But when the massacre happens, you really see the fusion movement disperse, and you really don't see that big support no more for it. And we haven't really had a movement like that since. Dr. Reverend Barber, who's here, you guys are familiar with him over here in the United States. For the past 5-6 years, he's been trying to rebuild that and really start a new fusion movement of all people to come together and try to bring back what we once had in before the 1898 massacre.
It's interesting what you were just touching on a moment ago about what happened in January earlier this year. And obviously it's quite uncanny, some of the similarities that we can see between the attack on Congress earlier in Washington, D.C. Right. I think one of the academics in your film actually predicted that there would be more coming, and he was saying that in 2015. So I imagine that's quite an uncanny, ironic feeling for you.
Yeah. And when we did that interview with him, I think that was 2012 when we actually did the interview.
Oh, right. So even earlier.
Yeah.
And so when those events were unfurling in January of this year, how did that make you feel?
I kind of knew it was coming because I think around November, prior to that, I actually did a couple of podcast interviews over here in the United States. And I kind of predicted that something like this is probably going to happen real soon. I didn't think it was going to happen. It was just a prediction because I saw the climate. I saw what was going on in the media. I just saw what was going on social media as well. And people were talking about doing something like this. And I said, hey, this is remnants of 1898 because they did the same thing. There were always rumors of guns were coming into the city of Wilmington. Newspapers were writing about the tension that was going on and what they wanted to do. And the government just sat by and just allowed it to happen. And then you saw it happen, the same thing on January 6th. So it was the same type of blueprint. It's just, over 100 years later, we see the same thing happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have any other questions? I was wondering if you might be able to say a few words for the filmmakers that we've got here. Obviously, Hill is a university, but we do have a number of degrees that we run here for filmmakers and media content makers. How did you get started? Did you study? Did you just get yourself a camera and get out on the streets? What was your route to becoming a filmmaker?
I guess, my route, I had a different route. Like, this was about 2002. I was about 100 pounds lighter back in those days, but I started off doing acting and modeling. That's how I kind of first got into this. And I moved to Atlanta, Georgia after that. And I just kind of got out of it. I just felt like it was real shallow and stuff like that. So I just stopped doing it and decided that I wanted to tell my own stories. But luckily doing a lot of those small student film projects and independent film projects as an actor, it built up a nice network. So when I wanted to do my own films, I could reach back out to those folks that I did projects with as an actor and learn from them. And so I would just intern, just come on set, follow them, shadow them, just see how they were able to put a project together from start to finish. And that's how I kind of learned. My background is graphic arts and marketing. So that helped me as well, just how to promote and put together an ad campaign for my project and marketing and promoting it. So all these things I've learned in life really, helped me become a documentary filmmaker. And so that's how I did it. I was able to put together a great team. At the time, we did Wilmington on Fire, and a lot of those folks, they've gone on they work in Hollywood now. We all kind of came in this together as wanting to tell a story. And me growing up in Laurinburg, North Carolina, which is my hometown, Laurinburg is about an hour and a half from Wilmington. And so, it just wasn't, a Wilmington story. This affected all of North Carolina. It even affected my hometown of Laurinburg as well. And so I decided that, I want to do documentaries. There's a lot of stories about African-American history and culture that I never heard about. And also people really haven't heard, or known about. We all know about Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Barack Obama, and that's it. And so I was like, what are those stories in between that history that need to be told? And so I decided that, I want to do that. And so we put Wilmington on Fire together. It was a labor of love. You know, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. So, you know, YouTube was always helpful, different documentary books. And also I had some mentors as well down the road that helped me put this thing together. And so I'm just excited about what the future, you know, looks like with these new projects. And when you see the newer projects, you can tell the evolution and the growth. You know, you always want to get better with each project and grow as a team as well. So I'm happy with the crew I have. We have fun. You know, we work hard, but we have fun. I know everyone who works on my documentary projects, they learn a lot. You know, I'm like, man, you know, because you're sitting down with these subjects for a good 4 to 5 hours, you know, each time you film them. And so you're getting like a free history lesson with all of them. And just doing documentaries has allowed me to meet all these great individuals. Like, if I wasn't doing documentary, I probably wouldn't have access to none of these folks that I film now. So I just tell folks that want to do it, if you're learning it in college now, great. Learn the technicals, learn to edit, learn to shoot your own stuff. There are stories all around you. You know, you'd be surprised what's in your own family, your own community, you know, even your own neighborhood. You'd be surprised if you talk to folks and really start exploring. You'll be surprised. There's always a good story around you. I'm actually thinking about, you know, I have a couple of projects like Wilmington on Fire Chapter 2. I have a martial arts documentary that I'm finishing up right now as well. But I'm also thinking about doing a documentary on myself, you know, because I'm dealing with diabetes right now, you know. So I'm thinking about doing a project on my battle with diabetes, but also the battle that the African-American community is dealing with it as well, you know, and what we need to do to fix that. So you can even look at your own self as a documentary subject. You'd be surprised how your story is very similar to a lot of people's out there.
That's excellent advice. Thank you so much for passing that on. Can you tell us a little bit more about Wilmington on Fire Chapter 2?
Yeah, Wilmington on Fire Chapter 2, we're done filming. We're actually working on the trailer for that now. And I'll definitely share that with you, Jenny, once it's done. We should have it done like next month, the trailer, but we start post-production. And Wilmington on Fire Chapter 2 is really looking at Wilmington through today's lens. So we start off, you know, we all know last year with the pandemic, where there was a huge protest movement going on, not only here in America, but across the world, you know, with police brutality, the removal of Confederate monuments in the United States as well. And so the spotlight came on Wilmington because the people that did the massacre, they also were supporters and also fought for the Confederacy in the United States. And so the Confederate monuments and the 1898 story always go hand in hand. And so there were huge protests last summer. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna go out here and start documenting some of this. So I had me and a couple other guys out there, and it was crazy. You know, you had these protesters that were, you know, they were nonviolent. You know, they were just protesting their right, and they kind of went head to head with the police department in Wilmington, and things kind of got out of hand. And so we start off the film with that. About, you see the gas, you see us getting hit with rubber bullets. And I actually got hit with a few of them as well. You see my camera drop on the ground, but it was real intense. And so the film starts off with that, and these young people in Wilmington who are standing up for social justice. So we have the social justice viewpoint. We also have a history viewpoint of a young man who is developing the first ever African-American history tour bus. And so he finally launched that this summer. And so we were there for the whole process, him getting the bus, having troubles getting it together, all the mishaps with it, but finally accomplishing his goal. And he's actually doing a lot of tours with some of the companies there, and also he's connected with the university as well to really show the true history of the city of Wilmington, it's true African-American history. And then the other side of the story is entrepreneurship and business, where we've documented and follow this couple who opened up a Black-owned co-working space in downtown Wilmington. And so we were there for that whole process of getting that together, finally launching it, and finally launching their programs as well to grow and build more Black businesses in the city of Wilmington. And so it's a very different film than the first one. You know, the first one is it's all history talking heads. This one is more of an observational cinema verite style approach, more intimate look into these people's lives, and also just the city of Wilmington as well, and how these individuals are trying to get the city past 1898 and make it that Wilmington of old, of 1897.
That sounds like a very worthy project, and I cannot wait to see it. We're very keen to welcome you back again when we can, so that we can see some more of your work. We'll definitely stay in touch. We're running out of time now, but we just want to say thank you to you again. We're going to give you a round of applause again to say thank you.
Thank you guys again. Hopefully, when we have part 2 ready to roll, I would love to come out that way and meet you guys in person.
That'd be fantastic, and we'll take you out for a meal in Liverpool.
Great. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right then. Take care for now. Bye-bye for now.
All right.